I wonder if we can start with the book, perhaps. Men Who Hate Women. It is a title that I'm sure will put a few noses out of joint and provoke a few hashtag not all men responses. But tell us just a little bit about what its central argument is.
Tell us a little bit about the book Men Who Hate Women. It'll cause hashtags and an uproar. I don't think A, men are that stupid, and B, anyone's really that interested in this topic anymore. This is a feminist, Kathy Bates, I think her name is. She's written a book on MGTOW in part, and incels and pickup artists, and she's going to claim that it says they're radicals, and they need to be treated in the same way terrorists are treated. So her argument is basically that men's voices need to be shut down, which is the feminist viewpoint, and she's a professional feminist in the UK. So let's dissect this interview, shall we?
Well, the clue's in the title. It's Men Who Hate Women, not Men Hate Women. We know that the vast majority of men out there would never dream and believe in behaving in these ways.
Yeah, okay, so it's men who hate women, not all men hate women, and not all men behave in this way. Yeah, well, fair enough. What about all the women that hate men and openly on mainstream TV call for the death of all men, advocate violence against men based on gender? So, you know, you've researched the men's side of the argument, the men's side of the issue. What about the women? Why, as a feminist, why are you not calling out your fellow feminists for their calls to action for violence against men? You know, is that out of the question for you? Is that not part of the issue? Is it just more blaming men? Is that what this is about? Because this is what it looks like to me.
But nonetheless, it is important to recognise that there is a real undercurrent of extremist misogyny in this country and around the world. And what the book uncovers is that there are communities of men actively advocating that women should be raped, should be brutally murdered, should be kept as sex slaves, and that these men are in communities hundreds of thousands strong. They're not just a few weirdos on the internet, as people might like to think.
Yep, so misogyny exists, yes, and as what the word means, there are men out there who hate women, without a doubt. I don't know any at all. I don't think I've ever come across one. I've come across plenty of man-hating feminists, which is the Misandry or Misandry, which is, there's plenty of that, and it's mainstream, absolutely mainstream. And there are women in the streets who are violent towards men, slapping men, kicking, bashing them. There's videos of it all over YouTube. Very few unprovoked attacks from men on women. There obviously have been some recently. I mean, as soon as one happens, it's all over the news. A woman bashing a man, that doesn't make it to airtime in any of the mainstream publications. But as soon as a man lifts a hand to a woman, yep, that's a global news story. It's very one-sided, this violent, gender-based violence argument that you're putting forward here, and your name's Laura Bates. So sorry about that. So yeah, as I say, very one-sided argument that's coming across here at the moment. Mind you, that's your agenda, isn't it? The women can do no wrong, whereas everything is men's fault. That's the feminist agenda.
What's really worrying is that the research for the book uncovered the fact that they're very deliberately radicalizing and grooming young men in ways that we simply don't necessarily recognize. So many teenage boys are being very deliberately reached out to by these communities and given these real misconceptions about feminism and about women.
So, I obviously she's promoting her book here. Radicalising young men in ways that we don't really recognise. Well, it's got to be pretty fucking subtle, right? And as far as reaching out to men go, or reaching out to young boys, and putting forward opinions that go against the feminist ideal of pure womanhood, etc., etc. I've seen plenty of videos by young men talking to each other, like their audience is young men, and they're discussing aspects of female nature that are undeniable. They're not uncovering any great secrets. It's just that they're learning the hard truth about female nature at a young age. And that's the information society that we live in. There's plenty of information out there. Some of it's true, some of it's not. But to just say that there's got to be a certain feminist approved view on what information is disseminated regarding women is something you're never going to achieve. I'll tell you that right now. Men built this internet, right? Women didn't build it, right? You think you own it, but you don't. And it's a free-for-all for everyone, or at least it should be. And if young men are going to talk to each other about the things that they need to learn to protect themselves from women like you, Laura, let's face it, because this is sensationalising the situation, in my opinion, what you're doing here. I understand you want to sell your book, but it's sensationalism, let's face it. And it's just a few hard truths that men are telling each other, or young boys are telling each other. There's no radicalisation going on, and there's no proselytising from MGTOW, at least anyway. MGTOW is a philosophy. It's men come to this decision themselves. MGTOW don't need to reach out to anyone.
And that they're leaking out further into our society as well. 27% of American men now say that they wouldn't have a meeting one-to-one in the workplace on their own with a woman. So some of these ideas that we might think of as very niche and extreme online issues are actually becoming quite worryingly widespread.
Well, I just accused you of sensationalism there, but I think you've underestimated the number of men who will not have one-on-one interviews with women. And for very good reason. Like, it's not a fringe or niche view, it's self-preservation, in my opinion, and all the men that I know who are in a position where they need to protect themselves or their businesses from false allegations on social media, will definitely not have one-on-one interview or any other situation with a woman that is not part of the family, so to speak. No, this is it's not. I mean, it's not fringe, and it's absolutely brought about by the hashtag MeToo movement. It's a response to stimulus from feminism. Like, if you're going to whinge and bitch about the men protecting themselves, then you've got a leg to stand on, because feminism, your kith and kin, so to speak, Laura, have brought that situation about, without a doubt. And if you want to alleviate the situation, then it's up to you. Like, men can't do anything about it. You've got the hashtag, and the women are weaponising it. So, make your bed, you lie on it. If the shit fits, wear it. It's just, don't come at men and tell us we've got to stand still with our bulls in our hands and take the bullets that come our way, it's not going to happen. That's not what men do, right? Men fight back, and this is one way that men are doing it. Simple.
Just in terms, though, of these misogynist networks, hundreds of thousands of people being indoctrinated, in essence, but who are responsible for them? Who are behind them? I mean, you mentioned that it's not just about some weirdos on the internet, because your thoughts immediately go to the incel movement, but it's a lot bigger than that, clearly.
It is. It does include the incel movement, so-called involuntary celibate men who believe that they're not having sex and blame women for not giving it to them. But it also goes much further than that. It includes groups like men's rights activists, so-called pickup artists. That's a $100 million global industry, essentially training men to sexually harass and in some cases sexually assault women. Some of these are industry so-called leaders who can rake in thousands of pounds from their supporters, from running boot camps. So there is money there. And there's also political benefit to be had from courting these groups. One Cambridge Analytica whistleblower, for example, said that Steve Bannon had deliberately courted the incel vote for Donald Trump. So these are much bigger and perhaps much more powerful groups than we might have acknowledged previously.
What an absolute load of rubbish. The interviewer there's, who's behind them? These radical groups grooming men. Who's behind it? Men are behind it in a large part, and there's no particular man behind MGTOW, I can tell you that, and I'm pretty sure incel would be in the same boat. Now, as far as incels go, you can buy vaginas on any street corner. So how men can be involuntary celibate, I don't know. Incel was a term coined by a fat, ugly feminist who couldn't get laid way back in the day. So if men are saying they can't get laid, I mean, what the fuck? You just got to put your money down and roll your condom on any bloody street corner anywhere in the world, for crying out loud. So involuntary celibates, I don't know. And as far as blaming MRA, I mean, that one there just really puts the lie to anything she's going to say about listening to men's voices. I mean, MGTOW aren't agitating for change, so it doesn't. None of this really affects MGTOW. But the MRA are struggling to get their voices heard in any way at all. And this mainstream media here, you can see the attitude here is just to disparage anything that men might have to say regarding the issues that around, the issues that MRA talk about. So, like another book from the feminist perspective, mainstream media, and men's voices shut down yet again. So, like MGTOW really, when in that situation, when you can't be heard, you're not going to be listened to, and no one gives a fuck, then all you've got is MGTOW, and it's not about hatred or anything like that. It's not about hating women. It's just about accepting that, if you want to live in a society that does that to men, then go ahead. Personally, I don't, and there's plenty of men I know who don't as well. And why should we? We shouldn't be maligned in any way. MGTOW is an honourable decision to make, and it requires discipline and thought and exercise and all kinds of ways to better your situation in the world on your own terms, set your own goals, and try to achieve them, and be happy in doing so, and learn about yourself. MGTOW's a great way to live.
So how best then for us to intervene in these networks, in these spaces, and in fact, who best to intervene in these networks? Because it strikes me that in these communities, a woman's voice is probably not desperately welcomed.
Yes, I think we do need to see men stepping up and offering young people in particular alternative places to get that sense of community and of purpose and of role modeling masculinity that these communities are so seductively providing. We also need to support vulnerable teenage boys who are very seduced by these communities, in part because of massive funding cuts to offline places where they could have got those kinds of inputs. So, for example, youth centres, adolescent mental health funding. We need to protect and support young men so that they don't fall prey to what really is a radicalising and grooming network, although we never label it in that way. In just the same way that we don't label the many men who have come offline and carried out massacres of women in the name of exactly some of these movements, terrorists. We don't use the word terrorism to describe them. We don't call what they're doing online radicalization. And yet I think we can see in our society all around us the impact of this extremist misogyny being very deliberately spread this week, perhaps, as much as ever.
So this is quite dangerous territory that she's going into here. As far as men coming offline and massacring women all over the place, I can think of one, maybe two incidents where a man has specifically massacred women because of a hatred of women. And I certainly don't condone that, or like it's obviously a tragedy. It's not something that I'm fully across, but there are incidents all over the world where you get your shooter, the active shooter or whatever it is, and they go and shoot up a movie theatre or school or what have you, and it's tragic. Now, as far as intervening in the radicalisation of men online, that borders on thought control, in my opinion. So we've got to be careful around that. Now, who has called for the defunding of these youth groups, and I think it was YMCA. There was a youth reach out thing there for that. I think it was the feminists, wasn't it, that defunded a lot of these help groups or intervention groups for young boys. I mean, there aren't any. I think it was the Boy Scouts got invaded by girls. Now you've got Girl Scouts or whatever it is, and you can't have all of the men's organisations, and it's not just the young men's, it's the older men's organisations have all been infiltrated by women, by the feminists. They've all demanded that access to all men's groups where boys were able to go to get support. Because having women in the room is, you can imagine a young boy getting sexually assaulted at school by his teacher, and he knows no one's going to listen to him because it's a good-looking female teacher who's the predator, and even if he does come out, she's going to get a slap on the wrist for it, and painted as the victim. Back in the day, he might have been able to go to his scout leader and at least get some kind of support from the scout leader, maybe. Who knows, But today, where you've got women in the mix, that boy's never going to come forward. That's just the way it is with boys and men. We don't talk about that sort of thing in front of women. Very rarely do we talk about it amongst ourselves. The feminists are the ones that have got the world into this situation, and the solo mothers. And now it's men's fault that we're not stepping up. We're not doing the right thing by them. So this Laura Bates, even if she is raising issues that are valid, she certainly doesn't have any answers to how to go about changing it. So,
Laura, given this scale of the problem, which some people seem to become aware of only in the past kind of couple of weeks, you know, that practically every woman has experienced some form of abuse, perhaps even sexual assault, or, you know, and given the fact that, you know, that a lot of men have been, you know, ultimately responsible for it, I mean, how confident are you that there is actually a way out of this?
I think that there is a way forward, but what it needs is real systemic structural change and not just platitudes. You know, a lot of people have said this week, wow, this is a tipping point. This is a moment of reckoning, as if women have never before risen up in a cry of grief and rage and shared their millions of stories. This carries on happening, and it will continue to happen unless we start to take notice of all of these cases, not just the odd one that hits the headline. You know, this book would have been relevant a couple of months ago when an older woman was killed by her husband, who strangled her to death and was given just 5 years in prison. It would have been relevant less than a year ago when police officers were taking selfies of themselves next to the murdered bodies of 2 Black women. It would have been relevant on any one of the 2 women a week who are killed on average in the UK every week.
Yeah, so that stat sounded pretty interesting to me. Couple of women a week getting murdered, and I think that one where she's talking about the old man strangling his wife to death, I think that was a mercy killing along the lines of euthanasia from memory. I just got something just triggered a memory in my mind there. I think that was to do with that. That's why the guy got 5 years in prison over it. So anyway, I did a quick Google search, just, you know, murders in the UK by gender, I think it was what I searched on, and this was the first stat that popped up: number of homicides in England and Wales by age and gender of the victim. So the light blue line here is the male victims, and as you can see, the female victims negligible, really. Like there's something here, I don't know what's going on there, or here. Older women seem to be getting killed more than older men. Not sure what that's about, but as you can see, you know, 84 16 to 24 year old men, 10 women. A few babies getting killed here by the looks of it. Now we know who kills babies in our society, don't we? And it ain't men. So this is no doubt young men killing each other, and that's probably prisons and whatnot as well getting muddled in there. So as you can see, the death rate amongst men is way higher than the death rate amongst women, but of course that doesn't rate a mention on any sort of mainstream TV show ever, anywhere in the world. So as far as Laura's concerned on that one, she can fucking jump in a lake. Fuck her.
So, you know, this is an ongoing problem, but if we want to see that change happen, it is possible. But what it takes is political and structural will. So it takes education, looking at what we're teaching boys at school instead of telling girls not to wear short skirts. And it needs somebody to have the will to take on the institutional reform that's needed of a justice system that is systematically, institutionally racist and misogynistic.
Yeah, so there you go. All the feminist talking points. Teach boys not to rape and blah blah. Girls shouldn't be told what to wear. Boys need to be legislated against, and women need to have the freedom to express themselves in any way they see fit. That's the feminist viewpoint, that put that yoke on, young man, get on that field and plough away. Just walk up and down with furrow after furrow after furrow, and if someone comes along and takes that plough away from you and all that you've worked for and all that you own, you've got to stay on that field and put another yoke on and plough away, because that's your lot in life. Whereas women, the poor little victims, they're the ones that have got freedom to express themselves in any way they see fit. You've got to take them as they are, and God forbid you should ever raise your voice in any way and buck the trend, because we're going to slam you down, you motherfuckers. Although we're not violent, it's men who are violent. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, we've heard it all before, Laura. We're sick of it. MGTOW's the answer.
Just 1.5% of rape cases reported to the police in this country result in a charge or summons. So that's where we need to be looking for structural change.
So 1.5% of rape cases reported to the police result in a charge or summons. 1.5%. So that's 98.5% of charges of rape are found to be without merit by the police. Let that one sink in. That's what that means. Like, she's saying that the police aren't acting on rape charges because misogyny and patriarchy and blah, 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 blah. Well, it seems to me that there's plenty of charges getting laid, or plenty of charges being or accusations being made, put it that way, and when the police look into the matter, they can't see a criminal case that can be prosecuted. Because if there is a case that can be prosecuted, there's no doubt that they'll put the perpetrator before the courts. Well, that's their job. That's what they do. You know, and so what she's just said there is that 98.5% of allegations of rape that get made to the police, so that's an official charge, like allegation, rather than just a hashtag MeToo comment, right? So this is serious stuff. 98.5% of them are found to be without merit in a legal sense. It's a very, very telling statistic. Very telling. It's no wonder men want out. No wonder.
Not telling women to stay in at night or to wear something different.
Well, Laura, let's see if any or most of that takes place at some point soon. I certainly hope so. Laura Bates, good to have you on the programme this morning. Thank you so much for joining us.